Hey guys, welcome back to the studio. This week, we're going to continue where we left off last time and build off the rules for descending dominant scale lines. First, I'll teach you about a concept that can help you add a ton of new colors and tensions to your single note lines. Barry Harris's family of 4 dominants. Once we've got a good grasp on how the concept works and how the different dominant chords in the family are related to one another, I'll show you how to practice them using the different descending scale rules that we went over last time. Finally, we'll wrap things up by playing some phrases using all these different ideas over both major and minor 2-5-1. You guys ready? Grab your guitar, let's get started. In order to take our lines to more interesting places, we can have a look at another one of Barry's genius ways of organizing harmonic vocabulary, the family of 4 dominants. Let's start out with a B diminished. If we lower each of the notes in this diminished, we'll get 4 different dominant 7th chords. Lowering the bass will give us a B flat 7. If we go back to the diminished and lower the tenor voice, we get an E7. We go back to the diminished again, and we lower the alto voice, we get a G7. And finally, we go back to the diminished one more time, and then lower the soprano voice, and we'll get a D flat 7. Then we can stack the roots of these chords up and get another diminished chord. This one would be B flat diminished. So what we can really see is that these chords are actually coming out of the diminished scale. Once we understand how all these dominants are related in a key, there's actually quite a lot we can do with this information. We can use them as substitutions for one another, as chord voicings, arpeggios, and scale-based lines using the same dominant 7 scale rules that we've been learning. Let's dig a little bit deeper now and figure out just how all these dominant chords are related to the key of C major. In the key of C major, we know that the 5 chord is a G7, so that one's pretty obvious. Now, B flat 7 is the backdoor dominant of C major. And one way of understanding how the B flat 7 is related to C is to view it as the dominant of the relative major to the parallel minor of C. In other words, the parallel minor of C major is C minor, and the relative major of C minor is E flat major. The dominant of E flat is a B flat 7. And that's how B flat 7 is related to C major. A D flat 7 is the tritone substitution of G7, which is related to C. And finally, E7 is the dominant of the relative minor of C major, and it's also the tritone substitution of B flat 7, the backdoor dominant of C major. Now, let's have a listen to how these chords sound as substitutions when played against a G7 shell. Just for the sake of being thorough, I'll play each chord in all 4 inversions as drop 2 voicings. I hope you guys can see how useful the dominant family can be when it comes to giving us more options to play varying degrees of tension in our dominant chords. When it comes to using this concept in our improvised solos, we should practice playing the different scale rules that we went over last time from each of the different dominant substitutions. I'll demonstrate doing this over a G7, resolving to C using each different dominant option. Just to keep this section from getting too incredibly long, I'm just going to show you guys how to do this from the root, the third, the fifth, and the seventh using the 1/2 step rule. You can, of course, find all the different combinations in the PDF for today's lesson over at my Patreon page, though. Here's that exercise for you to check out now. Keep in mind, this is really only scratching the surface of the different types of sounds that this concept can inject into your lines. If you spend time investigating all the different ways you could possibly use these ideas, there's near limitless combinations that you'd never ever find if you were to strictly adhere to chord scale theory. Up next, let's take a look at how we can use these ideas when playing over both major and minor 2-5-1. Before we do that though, I want to give a quick shout out to TrueFire.com for supporting the channel. TrueFire is an online lesson library that's host to literally thousands of courses on a wide range of musical topics from some really amazing artists and educators. With synced notation and tablature, as well as slowdown and looping features, it's super easy to follow along no matter what course you decide to pick up. While you wait for my courses to drop, you can use the link in the description or use offer code STUDIO for 35% off at checkout. And you'll also be supporting the channel at the same time. It's never been a better time to learn, practice, and play with TrueFire. Now, let's get back to the lesson and see how we can use these dominant substitutions over some major and minor 2-5s. Now that we spent some time practicing the scale rules with the different dominant substitutions, let's take a look at how we can use these in combination with things that we went over last time and play some phrases over a 2-5-1. When we use these related dominants as substitutions in our playing, Barry likes to call this playing with your brothers and sisters. Let's take a look at a phrase using one of the siblings over a 2-5-1 in the key of C. All right, so what happened there? Well, first we went up a chord off the 5th of G7 and then resolved down. Then we came down the scale with 1/2 step and landed on the 7th. That flat 7th of a G is also the 5th of a B flat 7, so then we came down the B flat 7 scale with 1/2 step and then did a diatonic enclosure to get the 5th of C to land on the beat. We could just end it there, but I really like ending on 3rds and 7ths, so I just jumped down to the 3rd to end the phrase. Have a listen to how that one sounds a little bit under tempo now. Let's do another one, this time using D flat 7 over the G7. Let's slow things down and take a closer look at what's happening in that line now. This time, we went up a chord off the 7th of our G7, resolved down, and then came down the scale. When I got to the second bar, I slipped into the D flat 7th scale on the 5th with A flat. From there, I came down using the 3 half-step rule, and then landed on the flat 7th of a D flat, which in this case ends up functioning as the major 7th of our C. Take another listen to how that phrase sounds a little slower. There's a ton of other ways that we can use the siblings over the 5 chord, and you can find plenty more phrase examples in the PDF for today's lesson over at my Patreon. In the meantime, let's check out how we can use the same family in the context of a minor 2-5. If we go to the relative minor, our 2 chord is going to be B half diminished. Remember though that B half diminished is contained inside of a G7, so we can play our same G7 scale ideas over that half diminished chord. Over the E7, we can play around with using the siblings, just like we did in the last couple of examples. Have a listen to this first phrase, and then we'll break it down together. This one starts out by playing up a chord off the 5th of a G7, or the 3rd of our B half diminished, then resolves down. From there, we came down the scale with 1 half step in between the root and the 7th. That lands us on the flat 7th of a G7, or in this case, it's the flat 9 of an E7. But that flat 9 is also the 5th of a B flat 7, so let's use that substitution. I came down the arpeggio of B flat 7 and then pivoted up to catch the 7th and resolve down. That lands us on the 6th of a B flat 7 scale, so I just came down the scale with no half steps and then landed on the 2nd, which ends up being the 3rd of our A minor, and end the phrase like this. Let's have a listen to that one again, under tempo this time. Let's do one more using B flat 7 again and see how we can displace things to get a different resolution to A minor. Check out how that sounds. This time I pivoted off the 5th of the G7 and then came up the chord, resolving up a 3rd. That puts us on the 6th, so we can come down using the 2 half step rule and land on the 7th of a G7. Now that F is also functioning as the 5th of our B flat, so let's come down that arpeggio, but pivot up, continue coming down from there, and then use this flat 7th to resolve up into the root of A minor and finish the phrase by landing on the 6th. Take another listen to how that phrase sounds, slowed down. Thanks for sticking around all the way to the end of today's video. I hope you guys were able to see how powerful this concept can be for adding new ideas into your lines. If there are other systems like this that have had an impact on your playing, like this has for me, leave a comment and let me know about it. I'm always on the hunt for new things that I can add to my arsenal. Next time, we'll cap off this little mini-series by going over how to apply these systems to the 12-bar blues. As always, if you found today's lesson helpful, make sure you give the video a like, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and hit that bell for notifications too. If you want to get access to a PDF for today's material, along with the whole back catalog for all the videos on my channel, you can get that for as little as $10 a month over at my Patreon page, or by just hitting that join button right here on YouTube. A special thanks goes out to Milan de Kaiser and Ron Maestas for being studio fans. I really appreciate the support. An extra special thanks is due to these studio members for their support as well. PH, David Zuckerbraun, Max Irwin, Everton Armstrong, Stephen Schwartz, Aaron Walters, Stephen Prager, Louis Rosen, Zisso Artis, Michael LeBroy, Carl Jackson, David Wortman, Aldo Fonseca, and Jesse Cable. An extra special shout out to Jazz Luminaire patron Bill Jacob. Thank you guys all so much for your continued support. I'm David Shore, and thanks again for hanging out with me here at the studio today. I'll see you guys next time.